Welcome back to another episode of Rock Boys Football. Some massive news coming late Wednesday night for not only the Oklahoma Sooner fans, but really the rest of the college football landscape. As former Washington State quarterback John Mateer committing to Oklahoma, this is not only the best quarterback that you saw in the transfer portal this cycle. I would go as far to argue that he's going to be one of the best quarterbacks that you see in the country in 2025. Now, we're going to get into John Mateer and what he brings to the Oklahoma offense, just this dynamic playmaking ability at the quarterback position, who, in my opinion, does not get nearly enough credit for what he can do with his arm talent. I think we talk about the dual threat nature of John Mateer, which is certainly there. This kid can spin it all around the yard. Where I want to start, though, is what does this mean for Oklahoma heading into the 2025 year? Because, in my opinion, this significantly changes the outlook that I have for Oklahoma in 2025. I think they can compete at the highest level of the sport. This to me feels kind of similar with Cam Ward coming to Miami last year. Cam Ward, Miami was 6-7 after the 2023 season. You inject Cam Ward, you make a couple of the transfer portal additions, and immediately Miami was competing for a college football playoff spot. Now that defense kind of let them down in the second half, but you make no mistake about it. Cam Ward joining that Miami Hurricanes program immediately made them one of the most dangerous teams in the country because they could just simply outscore everybody who was across the field from them. You look at John Mateer and say, I think he can have that kind of impact on Oklahoma in 2025. And it starts with it. Let's just look at John Mateer and how he stacks up to other quarterbacks in the SEC heading into 2025. As we sit right now, what's the date right now? We're doing this on Thursday morning, December 19th. How many quarterbacks are we taking over John Mateer in the SEC right now on December 19th? Because my argument is I don't know if I have a quarterback that I'm taking over. Now, you could see Arch Manning become a really good football player. You could see some of the new really talented quarterbacks. Garrett Nussmeier is very good at LSU. DJ Lagway at Florida. Sorry, some quarterbacks is coming to my mind. John Mateer as it sits right now, it's very reasonable to say you take John Mateer over every single other quarterback that you see in the SEC. And why is that so significant for Oklahoma is because go back to 2024, that defense was just fine in the SEC. In fact, Oklahoma won more games than they should have because of how good that defense was. And yeah, you lose some pieces to that defense, but we kind of know what Oklahoma and Brent Venables have kind of coming through the pipeline. It's going to be a damn good defense in 2025. You inject John Mateer into this offense, and yeah, was the quarterback position the only problem that Oklahoma had in 2024? No. We all know that offensive line was a disaster. You lost pretty much every single top pass catcher you had in that room throughout 2024. John Mateer is one of those quarterbacks that just elevates everybody. And that's really why I love him so much. Like, yes, he's a very, very good quarterback, but he's one of those guys, it doesn't have to be perfect around him because of his playmaking ability to really put up points. This to me, and we're going to get to John Mateer and talk about what he brings to me. This completely changes how at least how I look at Oklahoma heading into 2025. Now, I want to get into John Mateer. I want to talk about what this means for Oklahoma in terms of the rest of the transfer portal cycle. Before we get into it, as always, just want to say thank you to you guys and to the Oklahoma fans. A lot of moving parts over the last couple of weeks, right? Making some transfer portal additions, losing some players, bringing in Ben Arbuckle. It's been a blast talking this team. It's not going to get any less fun over the next couple of weeks. Can't thank you guys enough for rocking with it. If y'all do enjoy the content, consider subscribing to the channel. Without further ado, let's get into John Mateer, and let's just start with what this means for Oklahoma in the rest of the transfer portal cycle. And could you see a little bit of and I know I keep making that Cam Ward comparison. I really do think this is that they got that kind of move for Oklahoma. John Mateer comes to Oklahoma. Does this help Oklahoma attract more offensive talent over the next couple of weeks? Does this make some other wide receivers or offensive linemen or running backs, whoever Oklahoma is going after, does this make them look at Oklahoma really even on the defensive side of the football? Some of these players out of the transfer portal just want to compete at the top of the college football landscape. John Mateer allows you to do that immediately. And so what does this mean for the rest of the players that are in the transfer portal that are looking at Oklahoma and saying, all of a sudden you're looking at this program and team heading into 2025, in my opinion, in a little bit of a different light. And so does John Mateer attract more talent in the portal over the next couple of weeks? That's my first question. Number two, how does he just fundamentally change this Oklahoma offense? And again, to me, it starts with he doesn't need everything to be perfect around him to really put up points. This is a guy, because of how dynamic he is, how many different ways he can attack a defense. It doesn't need to be perfect around him. And you kind of look at the storyline the last couple of weeks. I mean, you land Luke Blanco, who I think is a bona fide starting tackle. You bring back Deion Burks, you get him back from going to the NFL. That's a legitimate wide receiver, 1-1 healthy. The pieces are starting to fall into place around John Mateer as well. I think you start with what John Mateer can do with his arm, specifically pushing the ball down the field. That was one thing Oklahoma really could just never get going. Yes, the offensive line struggled in pass protection, so it's hard to run some of those longer developing routes downfield to be explosive in the passing attack. You really didn't have a quality wide receiver room with all the injuries that Oklahoma had to go through. But I think on the same token, Jackson Arnold really struggled pushing the ball down the field. Jackson Arnold completed 7 passes, 20-plus yards down the field all year. John Mateer completed 25 of them. I mean, that's to my math real quick, that's 4 times as many explosive plays you're creating in the passing attack with John Mateer, pushing the ball down the field. That might be one of the most best assets that John Mateer brings to this Oklahoma offense, is what he can do pushing the ball down the field. How about you take a look at yards per pass? I mean, John Mateer averaged 9 yards per pass last year. Jackson Arnold, 5.7. That's nearly double yards per pass metric for John Mateer at Washington State than Jackson Arnold at Oklahoma. Rushing. Jackson Arnold was a damn good athlete, and they were starting to use that towards the back half of the schedule. John Mateer's and this is not a shot at Jackson Arnold. It's just different. And then Jackson Arnold forced 18 missed tackles forced. John Mateer, 54. You can involve John Mateer in the run game, and you don't have to really be afraid of involving him because how big he is. 6'1", 220. He's bigger than a lot of linebackers that are trying to tackle him. He knows how to make people miss. He's a very, very natural ball carrier when he gets into space. There's so many different elements that John Mateer brings to this Oklahoma offense that just weren't really happening for Oklahoma in the 2024 year. And I think finally you start stacking Oklahoma in the SEC. And it is funny because I was actually having a conversation with one of my buddies last night before this news hit. We were at dinner. Said, like, who are going to be the top teams next year? Like, especially in the SEC. Georgia moving on from Carson Beck. You have question marks about what that quarterback position is going to look like. Alabama moving on. I'd be very surprised if Jalen Milroe's playing football in Tuscaloosa, Alabama, whether he hits the portal, whether he goes to the NFL draft. Question marks about Alabama. They've lost a lot of talent. You look at Florida, say that's a young, talented team, but they kind of got to show it in 2025. I look at the SEC, and again, you have Arch Manning coming in Texas, and that's certainly a quarterback that I know that Texas program feels really good about, but a little bit of an unproven commodity. I look at John Mateer, I look at Oklahoma in the landscape of the SEC and say, we all know they have a defense that can win at the highest level of this conference. We saw it in 2024. It's not just a thought, it's a proven concept. They couldn't win a lot of football games because that offense they just didn't have an identity. They couldn't put points up on the board. That defense we know is going to be top level in the SEC. You inject John Mateer into this Oklahoma offense, you all of a sudden feel really confident that this Oklahoma offense can really start putting some points up on the board. I'm not sitting here December 19th and saying I'm picking Oklahoma to win the SEC, but it's hard not to consider them an early contender to compete in the SEC at the highest level with John Mateer coming and joining this program. And you don't have to worry about all the transition period. Everybody else is going to be transitioning. John Mateer, Ben Arbuckle, they're just picking up right where they left off at Washington State. And so you have a quarterback that's going to, and that's a really important dynamic too. There's not going to be any growing pains. Like Ben Arbuckle, John Mateer, they get each other. Ben Arbuckle showed that he can create a bona fide, legit offense around John Mateer using his skill sets, there's no projection here. You kind of have a really good feeling that John Mateer is going to have a lot of success, with Ben Arbuckle and this Oklahoma offense immediately in 2025. This is a season-changing move for Oklahoma heading into 2025. You make no mistake about it. Let's see what other pieces that Oklahoma can put around John Mateer over the next couple of weeks in the portal. And it's off. This is going to be a really fun team to talk about over the next couple of weeks. We'll continue to update it, probably do a film deep dive. Appreciate you guys rocking with it. If y'all do enjoy the content, consider subscribing to the channel. We'll talk to y'all later. Peace.